This video is brought to you by Dehancer Film Emulation, compatible with the following apps. For more information on Dehancer, check the link in the description. All that this photographer created may not have existed if it weren't for fate playing a pivotal role at a pivotal time. This Magnum photographer's subdued images examine and explain cultures and places in a way that is truly his own. He's captured American landscapes, the airwaves of Britain, and the fall of the Berlin Wall. The subject matter that makes up a majority of his work, while mundane to those who experience it daily, can be eye-opening to those of us who don't. This is Insight for Inspiration, Mark Power. Now that everyone in the developed world seems to own some form of camera, a different space has opened for documentary photographers. It's a space free from specific events, where there are different expectations, where it is first and foremost about ideas. Now we can all take pictures, with varying degrees of ability. It's what we do with our cameras that counts. Mark Power was born in the United Kingdom in 1959. This painter-turned-photographer created well-crafted images with a large format camera to cover a wide range of topics, usually over a long span of time. His well-rounded knowledge is the byproduct of 25 years as a professor of photography at the University of Brighton, and becoming a full member of Magnum in 2007. This knowledge has given him the ability to pursue informed and considered work that has revealed itself in 14 published books. The first of his landmark achievements came in the form of a substantially historic event known the world over. Sometimes the hands of fate provide photographers with the chance to completely change their lives in a way that is almost unbelievable. This sort of situation happened for Mark Power when the Berlin Wall fell, just as he was on the verge of throwing in the towel and giving up on photography entirely. Prior to this, he had been trying to make photography work as a career for multiple years. Given his political leanings and what he was trying to photograph, things hadn't worked out as planned, and he was in the process of pursuing a career in carpentry, because in his words, "My so-called career was heading backwards at an alarming rate, and I found myself facing a court appearance for crippling credit card bills." On the precipice of a radical change in his life, one of his old acquaintances heard about the situation. Believing in Mark's photographic abilities, he handed him £200 in cash and told him to take one last swing at photography. Power took the money and booked a flight to Berlin on November 9th, 1989, with an incredibly weak scheme to figure out a way into the Eastern Bloc, to take photos of what life was like there. Upon his arrival in West Berlin, he and another photographer checked into their hostel, went on a walk, and came across Checkpoint Charlie. At that point, they noticed a large amount of people gathering there. Mark then asked one of them, hands deep in his pockets against the increasing chill, why this was. He'd seen, he told us, a news bulletin claiming the wall would open for free passage from the DDR that very evening. Incredulous, George and I made a quick decision. We pooled our dwindling resources, got a taxi back to the hostel, collected all the camera equipment and every roll of film we had, and hurried back. Once they returned, crowds were growing outside the wall. They pushed through to get to the front. Excitement and confusion built over the next few hours until midnight. At that point, the gates opened and East Germans began to funnel into the west. Incredibly, not only were we at the front, but at the right part of the front. I was pushed through the door by the heaving crowds to find myself in no man's land, alongside a small group of confused guards, apparently unable to believe the orders they'd been given. An endless stream of people stumbled by, pushing in bewilderment at the doorway, before passing joyfully west into the arms of the masses beyond. I had a strange feeling of crashing a party I hadn't been invited to. Power speaks about how he struggled to wrap his head around what had just happened to him. However, he knew that without a doubt this was a historic moment, and since he was one of the only photographers in the area, he worked frantically to capture it and document what was going on. Early the next morning, he returned to his hostel with a flurry of messages asking if he had witnessed and photographed the event. He responded by sending his negatives off by airmail to be processed by the news as soon as possible. He would continue to seek out alternative scenes of Berlin once the masses of press photographers had descended upon the city, which resulted in a body of work that was a unique take on this historic moment. Reflecting on those days that effectively changed his life forever, he stated, "By accident, I'd become a news photographer. The newspaper sale, and many others that followed, cleared my debts and I suddenly found myself in demand. I spent the next 3 years working for numerous magazines and papers, before becoming disillusioned with that world too. I started teaching and, I like to think, became a better photographer because of it. If you're getting anything out of this, if you could please like, share, comment, and subscribe to help push the video forward, I would really appreciate it. Now, back to the video. This series is meant to discover what kind of photography can be produced when a British perspective that has been intertwined with American culture is given first-hand experiences within the United States over a period of years. According to Mark, for as long as I can remember, I've wanted to explore America, an ambition fueled by a legion of TV shows that crossed the Atlantic in the 1960s, which piqued his curiosity specifically in terms of the variety of places that exist in America that are distinctly different from the English suburbs he was raised in. In creating this project, he also notes that through being an educator for over 25 years, he's very aware of how he's been influenced by American photographers, such as Eggleston, Evans, Friedlander, Shore, and Soth, to name a few. This influence on how he shoots furthers the entangling of American and British influences on his life and the shaping of his photographic voice. The series titled Good Morning America now has 4 volumes. It began when Power worked on a Magnum series titled Postcards from America that pushed the members of the group to collaborate while finding unique ways to cover a central topic. For Mark to participate, he says, "I began, although I may not have realized it at the time, to search for the America which lived in my imagination, the one generated during childhood, the one that had probably never existed at all." What began as Postcards for America blossomed into Good Morning America, the series that has now been constructed by Mark Power for over 12 years. The first printed volume of the series saw its release in 2019. On his continued effort to pursue this project, Power stated, "My work in the US has evolved, inevitably, over time, especially since Postcards came to an end in 2015. I never began a project with the thesis I want to prove. If I did that, I'd surely limit myself, denying myself all sorts of opportunities. I try to remain open-minded, and certainly, the longer I spend in America, the more I learn. But the more confused I get as well. It's such a complicated country, beset with problems, many running so deep it would be far too simplistic to blame them all solely on Trump." Mark also claims his British background and accent have played a part in his unique experience within the United States, by granting him interactions he wouldn't have had otherwise with locals. Often bewildered as to why he came to their part of the country when he could be anywhere else. It's brought him to places he may not have had access to otherwise. And he claims it kept him out of danger in situations that got a little touch and go. "It's so different from working at home, in the UK, where I have a deeper understanding of why things are as they are. But, on balance, I quite like being from somewhere else. Remember, I'm seeing America through the filter of an imposing cultural legacy that helped define me. As such, it's a strange mix of familiar and unfamiliar, of fact and of fiction." While Power is still working on this project for what he estimates to be another 4 years, with a goal of creating 5 volumes when it's all said and done, he hopes that this project will one day be seen as an important comment on America during the years that he photographed it. It is truly intended to be a standoff observation of America. All of the photos are created at a distance, using a tripod, to carefully take the time to craft the desired images that display the wide-open landscapes Power has been chasing. He finds these compositions by walking for hours, in order to gain perspectives that cannot be found from places easily accessible by car. He admits that many of these images are not loud, and might come off as boring to some viewers, but that his artistic voice tells the same stories of issues dealt with by humanity that you might find in louder images of cities, riots, and demonstrations. His photographs simply do this in a different way, because Power believes those issues still reveal themselves in landscapes. Further reflecting on the role the size of America has played in his work, when outside the big cities, anyone visiting the States from the congestion of Europe can't help but notice the enormity of the space and the layers of history that are inevitably produced when a country is so big, it's not necessary to knock a building down in order to build another. As much as Power was compelled to take photos of the landscapes of America, he was also inspired to do so within his own country, through a regular experience that he feels brought with it a reinforced sense of Britishness. The inspiration for this project came from the shipping forecast, which is sent out periodically throughout each day, to allow those at sea around Britain to have an indication of what weather is coming their way, through a series of words and phrases that are a little hard to decipher without any context for their meaning. As Power puts it, while the forecast or at least our version of it, uses words we understand. The actual meaning of each sentence remains elusive, unless of course, your life depends upon it. I was looking for pictures that were visual metaphors for the spoken words, somewhat difficult to understand, and not at all self-explanatory, usually because I would intentionally leave out contextual information. Also, the poetic and mantra-like delivery of the broadcast is unashamedly romantic and beautiful, so I try to make beautiful images as well. The photos for this project were all created in black and white, on beaches or near the British coast. They were all captioned with the forecast given at 0600 hours on the day they were created. The series was meant to embody the connection the island nation of Britain has to the sea, but through its inhabitants, not those on the water. I was interested only in photographing people like myself, landlubbers, if you like, and not heroic sailors or fishermen. Completing this project was difficult because he intended to create images in all 31 of the areas that the shipping forecast covers. It took him 4 years to complete that goal, because he had little money at the time, and some areas are incredibly difficult and expensive to get to. However, he won a photography prize for $25,000 during this stretch of his life that allowed him to complete the production of this work. This project speaks to how things that might seem mundane and everyday to certain people can also make deep connections when photographed and conceptualized properly. The project Destroying the Lab for the Sake of Experiment was the invention of Mark Power and a poet friend of his named David Cockrell. The work consists of poems and photography that are meant to play off each other with deeper meaning and engagement. Power talks about how it was a riff on how each art form is composed. Photography is limited by what is in front of the camera. While its greatest strength might be a reasonably true rendition of reality, this might, conversely, be seen as its weakness. The poet, like a painter, can choose to omit anything they don't wish to include. On the same subject, Cockrell stated, "In simple terms, poetry is trying to paint pictures in your head with a metaphor and simile. You don't want these to be too obvious or cliche. Mark's pictures give me the freedom to explore my own writing without worrying about the reader lacking context. I could write something completely emotional without having to worry about the time, date, or place where it was written. His pictures did that for me." Aside from playing off each other's work in terms of what they created and how it was created, Power says this collaboration was a great break away from the lonely pursuit that photography traditionally is, and that it helped him complete the work even when it became challenging. Dan and I encouraged each other to keep working through the more troublesome, darker periods. We sent each other our work at the end of every trip, and could see our project was heading in the right direction, giving us the impetus to keep going. I loved his poems. They consistently added another dimension to our shared experiences. Power has experimented with a wide variety of subject matter that has helped craft him into the photographer he is today. From Icebreaker, where he photographed what was going on from an icebreaker over the course of 5 days, a 5-year project covering Poland's move into the European Union called The Sound of Two Songs, Superstructure, which followed London's Millennium Dome project, and several others. His work teaches us to embrace what's going on around us, while seeking out our curiosities elsewhere, and the power that comes from creating projects over long spans of time. Thanks to Dehancer for sponsoring this video. For more information about their film emulation software, please check the link in the description. Thanks for watching. Please like, share, comment, and subscribe. And until next time, keep developing.